Hello, everybody. My name is Alexis Janson. I am a former Wizards of the Coast employee, former R&D member. You might know me as the winner of the Great Designer Search 1. So right now we've got the Great Designer Search 3 going on. Wizards is running the third contest in the series, trying to hire a new great designer. I was actually a guest judge on challenge number 1, and then I left Wizards of the Coast to move on to bigger and better things. But I had so much fun judging the first challenge that I decided, you know what, let's do sort of my judging of the second challenge. Look through it and see if I can find anything interesting to talk about. Do a little magic design talking. I'm trying something new here with a video format. Please bear with me. Let me know if you like it. Let me know if you want to see more of this, more of other content in a vlog type format, maybe a podcast, maybe discussion panel. I don't know. I'm messing around, seeing what I like to do. I like making content. I like working with the community. Anyway, so on to the challenge. So Great Designer Search 3, challenge number 2. This was called a circus act, and the goal of this challenge was to design cards for a set called Bigtopia. Basically a circus theme set. Make cards of every rarity, make cards of every color, make a legendary card, and the interesting thing was they gave you a list of 25 card names and told you, use these. You can change them only if it's a legend, otherwise you have to match these names exactly. So this was a top-down design contest. A lot of times when we make sets themed around top-down resonant concepts like Innistrad with the horror, or Eldrazi with the eldritch horror, or let's see, what's another recent example? Kaladesh with the artifact inventor's fairy theme. Most sets have something top-downy about them, and you look through all of the resonant tropes that people might be aware of, and you try to design to those tropes. And so this was doing that for a circus, which is interesting. The thing I found most interesting without looking at the cards was I was wondering how many people would do sort of the Rakdos style approach, sort of the seedy, party, corrupted, sort of that vibe that Rakdos have of like taking a circus to 11 and turning it into kind of a hell show, basically. Turns out there's only actually one Rakdos card with a carnival or circus-like name that I could find, Carnival Hellsteed, but trust me, it was the thing. You can see their take on Human Cannonball right here, Launch Party. That's a Rakdos-ish card. Anyways, so I encourage you to read this yourself. I'm not going to read through everything. But I'm going to try and go through the designs and see what I think. So Ari, let's look at his work first. So we've got design number 1, a common, Trained Elephant. So it's a 4/4 trample, has vigilance as long as you control a human. This is actually a really nice, clean design. It kind of plays into the same space as dinosaurs in Ixalan, where you have the dinosaurs and you have the humans that interact with the dinosaurs, kind of like the handlers. I'm actually kind of surprised no one called that out here. But generally speaking, really the biggest flaw that the judges called out here was that this is actually just a mono green card. Mono green has vigilance. Vigilance is actually, it's about a third as common in green as it is in white, but it's still totally primary color pie. Green has access to vigilance whenever it wants. So this could have just been a mono green card. There's nothing here to make it white for his test either. I don't know if he did a white card or not. Acrobatics. It's got an interesting line of text that we've never seen on a Magic card. If target creature is blocked, it becomes unblocked. And the reason we don't use a line of text like this is because, well, it doesn't really do anything that you can't do without mucking up the rules. Like this line of text has a ton of rules baggage. What does it mean for the creatures that we're blocking it? What does unblocked actually mean? Does it trigger things that trigger when something's not blocked? All these questions get raised, and we don't like to write lines of text, especially on commons, but just generally we don't like to write lines of text that require the players to know a lot of complicated corner cases when the benefit's not there. And here the benefit's not there because there's no reason this card can't just say target creature is unblockable this turn. Or conversely, you could say target blocked creature deals damage to the opponent instead of the creatures blocking it. Maybe even prevent the damage going back. Like, you could do this a lot of different ways. Blue doesn't generally get damage prevention, but it could be argued as a tweak in order to make this functionally do what it's supposed to do. Feats of strength. It's interesting to have a converge. So it's converge. Target creature gets +2/+2 for each color of mana spent to cast card name and gains trample until end of turn. It must be blocked this turn if able. So there's a couple things interesting going on here. One, you've got a converge card with 2 green in the mana cost, and really, to me, goes against the whole point of converge. Like, converge screams, play me in a multicolor deck. Play me in a deck that makes as many colors as mana as possible. And then Feats of Strength says, just kidding, you need 2 green mana. You want a green deck that can consistently make 2 green mana. Now, to be fair, green is the best at mana fixing, and a lot of your cards that you're going to use to cast this with 5 colors, or I guess 4 colors of mana, are going to be cards that tap for green or other colors, like Birds of Paradise and Fertile Ground and things like that. But it's still kind of a little bit of a frustrating position. You don't want to put your players in a position where you're creating this kind of tension where they have to do this thing, and then you're telling them, well, hold on, wait. But don't do it in this situation. The rest of this card is pretty normal and expected. Most of the judge comments were basically saying this isn't a feat of strength. This is making a creature strong. A feat of strength should be something where the creature is already strong and is doing something. And I'm not gonna lie, like, I didn't think about that. Like, that wasn't a thing. I wasn't like, what does feats of strength mean? Well, this is what it means in my head. Well, to me, just feats of strength in my head is a very broad concept, and like, I'd be okay if a card that was called Feats of Strength was about getting a creature to be strong enough to do a feat of strength, as opposed to requiring a creature that's already strong. So, but I see what they got there. Unicycle, this one's hilarious. 2 mana artifact, equipped to equipped creature gets +1/+1, has haste. Whenever a creature with equal power and toughness enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach a card name to it. So, first thing I'm going to mention is this is an equipment. And if you have read the article, if you've read Twitter, there's a bit of a divide on this. A number of people who think that a unicycle is a vehicle, and a number of people who think a unicycle is a equipment. And where do you draw the line? Why do you draw the line? Do you draw the line on how big it is? Do you draw the line on whether or not the equipment enhances a person rather than being controlled by a person? Is the equipment the thing doing the damage? Is the vehicle the thing doing the damage? Lots of ridiculous joke posts about vehicle equipments, and horses are horses' equipment, are horses' vehicles. Well, obviously they're creatures. It's funny because, well, yeah, just go look it up. Trust me, it's hilarious. But I think equipment's fine. I think it can be justified either way, equipment or vehicle, and it kind of depends on what the card's trying to do. I don't like having super rigid delineations of like, this card type must always represent this thing and this thing and this thing, and that's how we get to things where it's like, oh, we can't have a tapping enchantment because it's this magical thing, and artifacts can tap and they represent relics and equipment, and what do you do if you want something that taps but is magical, or what do you do if you want something that, you know, is colorless but is magical? And like these rigid concepts, I think the whole point of Magic is that you have these concepts and you can use them in lots of different interesting ways as long as they make sense holistically with the set you're trying to do. So yeah, maybe you don't have tapping enchantments all the time, but if one set is about tapping enchantments, I think that's cool. And anyways, my point is, unicycle being an equipment doesn't bother me. Being a vehicle wouldn't bother me. I'd be fine as long as they were consistent within the set of Bigtopia. This phrase, equal power and toughness, is one of the coolest phrases I have seen in a while. I'd love to see more done with that. The idea that equal power and toughness is a trait that you look for and it represents a quality, in this case being balanced, I think is a great idea. I think it makes me start to think about like, how often do we do that? We do that pretty often, but not so often that this just says every creature. We tend to put square stats, which is what this is referring to. We call them square stats, creatures with the same number before and after the slash. We tend to try to make any card that cares about increasing or decreasing power and toughness, or increases power and toughness of other things. Like, we try to make those things square so that the math is less complicated, but that's not, you know, obviously not a guaranteed thing. Like prowess, for example, cares about increasing power and toughness, and you can see there's lots of prowess creatures with non-square stats. So it's not a hard and fast rule. It's just an interesting thing to think about. So that's that. I'd love to see that as a concept to build around in a tribe somewhere or in a theme in a set or something. I think it could totally be pretty interesting and let you look at old cards in a new light. And that's why phrases like this tend to be interesting, is they give you a new thing to build around that is backwards compatible with old cards that don't have to change. Like, a lot of times amateurs designers start doing things like saying, oh, this is a fire spell. It is a instant hyphen fire. And then they'll have other things that care about that. They'll say, like, this has protection from fire spells, or whenever you cast a fire spell, it does an extra 2 damage or whatever. And the problem with those things is they're not backwards compatible. And so I feel like phrases like this are a gold mine of Magic design when you find them. They're really hard to find, but when you find something that you can use to segregate cards in a backwards compatible way, like that is a gold mine. That is a mechanic there that you want to hold on and save and use at the right time, because it creates all sorts of new backwards compatible opportunities. So I would expect this phrase to not just be a throwaway card. I would expect it to turn into something that enough cards in a set cared about that it was a draft around archetype, and also created some constructed level cards for things like EDH and Pauper and Cube and stuff like that. Anyways, bravo. Awesome phrase. I love it. So Traveling Circus. It's a land, enters the battlefield tapped, adds 1 mana of any color when it does so, but otherwise it taps for colorless, and you can spend 2 to return it to your hand, only if you have a gold permanent. So there's a lot going on here, and there's a lot of words for what is basically not that exciting of a card. It's an upgraded common. As the judges talk about, there's a card called Crumbling something or other. Hold on. Crumbling Vestige, I think. That basically does the first portion of this card. So there's nothing wrong with a rare being like a strictly better version of a common. That's fine. But what makes this not okay is that the part of the card that is the same is super common, and the part that is not, sorry, let me not do that. The part that is not the same, the part where you can bounce it, that's literally the only thing that's different, is you can bounce it. It doesn't make it exciting. Like, it's not exciting in a Timmy way. It's not exciting in a Spike way, because Spike's going to play much better dual lands than this. They're going to want cards that are just really good. And it's not that exciting in a Johnny way. Like, this is a really expensive thing to do to, like, trigger landfall once a turn or whatever it is you're doing. And there's other cards that do this way better, like there was a blue legendary land in Kamigawa that I forget the name of that you could return to your hand much cheaper and also didn't come into play tapped. Anyways, so that's just getting started. This activate this ability only if you control a multicolored permanent seems extraneous to me. Why is that there? That doesn't need to be there. It's weird that you tap it for 1 and then can immediately use that 1 for its own ability. There's just so much going on here that adds complexity, and the end result is a really bad rare land. I don't know what I would do to save this. I'm just saying, like, be careful that your words give benefit. Be careful that they actually produce a card that is exciting to read if it's rare, fun to play, and isn't just words that kind of just make it look like an interesting card, mechanically interesting, but don't actually produce the result you want. Clown Car. It's a rare. It's 4 mana, artifact vehicle, 1/4 haste, crew 1, and when it attacks, draw a card for each creature that crewed at that turn. So, this line of text sort of implicitly answers the rules question I could see lots of people having, which is, can I overcrew a card? Because otherwise, why would you have this line of text with a crew 1? So it kind of says, that's a neat trick to do when you're writing a card that does something kind of new and kind of weird in the rules. Sometimes you can find a way to word it, or a trick in the design where the text of the card doesn't make sense unless a certain thing is true. You write it, in this case, you write it so like a player reads it and goes, wait, hold on, this tells me that each creature, but it's only crew, so obviously I must be able to crew it with more than one thing. Now you could arrive at the conclusion that, oh, that just means like Ornithopter, 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 1 power, but I think this does that job. Other than that, I don't have much to say about this other than it's just a ridiculously overpowered card. Like, it's a worst case scenario. It's kind of like a bad way to draw a card for each creature you control, but it's 4 mana, so that's pretty good. Just taps your creatures. And in best case, you do that, and then next turn you do it again because your opponent couldn't kill it. And that's just insane. So, I don't know what... I get the flavor is a bit tenuous anyways. Like, why is a clown card drawing cards? Like, that doesn't make sense to me. Anyways, moving on. Maxine, Keeper of Marvels, Ringmaster. So this is a legend that they took the name Ringmaster and renamed it. I'm going to stop here for a second and say I was a little surprised when I read this. The judges didn't ding on this, but I interpreted the rules as saying if you wanted to make a legend of a name, you had to, like, tweak the name, not completely replace it. So nothing in the main name of this card tells me it's a Ringmaster, so it seemed a little weird. Anyway, so this is a mythic rare. It costs 2R, legendary creature, human rogue, 2/2. Whenever you cast a gold spell, make a gold. Same thing from Rivals of Ixalan and Ixalan. Spend Wooburg to put 3 +1/+1 counters on target multicolored creature. It gains vigilance, flying, and haste until end of turn. Wow, that's a mouthful. So you've got this mono red card that says play multicolored spells, and then the payoff is if you play enough multicolor spells, hopefully you'll get enough variety of mana with the help of this gold to be able to cast Wooburg to get your payoff. I'm not gonna lie, that's not what I would try to do with this card. I would be like, okay, let's take things like Manamorphose, which is obviously a ridiculous card anyways. Cards like Manamorphose that are multicolored and draw a card and are cheap, and I'm just going to try to make a bunch of gold and do some sort of stupid combo with my gold. Yeah, that's probably not what the designer intended. It's clear they intended this to be more of a build-around for a creature deck. There's some cute stuff going on here with the 3 counters and 3 abilities matching up. That being said, I don't quite get where this is really going. I don't see the Ringmaster flavor. I mean, I see the 3 rings, but like, I guess it's trying to kind of say that if you cast a really fancy circus act and it's multicolored, circus makes some money, and you can spend more money to make your acts even more cool. So, bit of a tenuous stress. That's not really what a Ringmaster would do. Ringmasters don't make money, but anyways, I'm stretching it. So that's pretty much, I think, all I've got on that one. So design number 8, the Astonishing Alfonso Magician. Costs 1, a white, a blue, and a black. It's a planeswalker. Has 4 loyalty, +2 to exile a non-rabbit permanent and make a 0/1. Sorry, non-rabbit permanent you control. Make a 0/1 white rabbit creature token. -3, exile target non-bird permanent. Create a 1/1 white bird token with flying. So the +2 and the -3 are almost exactly the same, except the +2 exiles your own permanents, and the -3 exiles anybody's permanent. And then -7, you may play any number of cards exiled by card name without paying their mana costs. So the biggest strike against this, the judges most of them caught this, but I agree, is that the -3 is so much more powerful than the +2. Like, exiling your opponent's permanents is obviously way better than exiling your own. Exiling your own is more like a cost. Exiling your opponent's is an actual advantage. And then you get a better token. You get a white bird token with flying. You get a 1/1 flyer if you exile your opponent's stuff, but you only get a 0/1 rabbit if you exile your stuff. Like, how is that? I'm really surprised that wasn't the opposite. Like, the reward for exiling your own permanents, and a totally fair thing. So, like, +2, we could make a card that was just +2, make a 1/1 flyer. It might be a little bit good, depending on the rest of the stats, but that's totally a printable planeswalker ability. So, to take that and make it only make a 0/1 and also have the sort of cost of exiling your own stuff. I mean, yeah, you get to get those cards back later, but let's be real, like, you can't count on that. You're not exiling your own stuff. This isn't like a Blink deck card. You're not going to play this and say, this is how I consistently exile and return my permanents. That's just kind of like just a bonus. you gotta be realistic. The exile is a cost here. That's how it's gonna play. It doesn't matter what your magical Christmas land dream is. So why aren't the tokens reversed? Why didn't the +2 give me a 1/1 bird? Maybe even a 2/2 bird. I think you could probably get away with a 2/2 bird with that. If you said non-land permanent, you'd want to make it non-land permanent. I think that might be fair. And then when you exile your opponent's stuff, you get the silly little 0/1 rabbit. Like it's kind of like a consolation prize. And you still have the flavor. You have the flavor of the birds and the rabbits, and then he's like, poof, everything's back. The flavor on this card is great. The story is amazing. Unfortunately, flavor alone doesn't make a good card. Play patterns of the card have to be interesting. So still, I think this is workable. I think there's a lot of work that R&D could do with this. It's kind of unfortunate that the GDS isn't about iteration and there's no kind of back and forth, because I guarantee that if we were doing this set and this came up in an R&D meeting, we'd find a way to make this work. This is an amazingly awesome package of story and flavor and abilities in a broad sense. So thumbs up, awesome card. I think it's workable. I hope that the judges give you enough credit for the concept you were going for and the ability to plant a good seed of an idea, because that's really, to me, the most important job as a designer of cards, is to plant seeds of ideas. Nothing ever comes brain, it happens, but nothing ever just is like, I have this idea, here it is as a card, it's perfect. You iterate on it. So yeah, that was Ari. I'm not going to spoil like who gets to continue and who doesn't. If you care about that, read. I'm just going to go through the cards. That was 1. That was not the right button. This is the right button. So let's look at Chris Mooney's cards. So I'll try to be a little bit faster. I think I've talked about all of the basics of the quiz by now. So acrobatics, it's a common, costs you, it's a sorcery. Target creature you control gains flying and prowess until end of turn, draw a card. This card is brilliant. Like, obviously prowess was originally concepted as an acrobatic, not really acrobatics, is like more like martial arts. But, you know, the distance between martial arts and acrobatics is like this. They're both like elegant and graceful and sort of like, you do things where the grace and the motions are more important than like the literal strength of it, and that's how you beat your opponent. So I think this is great. There's some issues here that the judges call on, but I just wanted to call out how amazing this card is. I could see a world where you want it to also give +1/+1 to make up for the fact that you've already cast a spell, so that all of your prowess kind of tracks, but that doesn't work if you cast 2 of them. Then you have to cost for that. Could be an interesting aura. I could totally see this as an aura. Yeah, anyways, I think this is great. Let's move on. Traveling Circus. It is a aura. It's an enchant land. Costs 1 green mana. Enchanted land has tap, add 1 mana of any color. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you may attach card name to that land. So this falls into a class of cards most sets have one of, which is the bad mana fixer. The card that you probably shouldn't actually be playing. It fixes your mana if you're desperate. If you're a good player, if you're like a spike level drafter, then you feel bad when you play it. You feel trapped if you have to play it. Navigator's Compass, I think, is the most recent one of these. Compass. Yeah, Navigator's Compass. So this card from Dominaria is another example. Like, this card's terrible. It's not worth a card slot. But every once in a while, you have a deck where you play it and you sigh to yourself and you're like, I guess I'll play that card. They're often traps for newer players. So anyways, this card has that same problem. It's not worth a card. It fixes your mana, but it doesn't actually give you any advantage. It doesn't give you a card's worth of value. Now, there's nothing wrong with designing those cards, but I think it's a missed opportunity. This could have been designed in a way that didn't have that problem. Now, I don't know exactly what that is because, my first instinct is to make it a little bit more expensive and say Enchanted Land has tap, add 2 mana of any color. So now the card accelerates you and gives you a card's worth of value by being sort of a pseudo land. Problem with that is that then the second line of text means every time I play a land, I get to ramp a little bit more, which is bonkers. And I don't know how to fix that. Maybe if it cost 2G, it might still be balanced. I don't know. I'd be interested in trying that. I do like the flavor. I like the flavor of the idea of a circus going from land to land to land to land. It never goes back to anywhere it's already been. Maybe there's something you could play with there. I don't know. I think it's cool. Design number 3, Ringmaster, uncommon, 2 and a W, creature human, 2/2. Whenever Ringmaster or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature gains Exalted until end of turn. This is another case of writing a bunch of text to do some really confusing stuff that basically boils down to this being a 2W 2/2 Exalted. Like, yeah, sure, if I play a card that goes tokens, like, it's kind of not quite Exalted, it's a little bit better. And then turns that I don't play a creature, I don't get the bonus, and kind of it all just kind of works out to be mostly just Exalted. Or you could do the other way, where you could say whenever a creature enters the battlefield, target creature gets +1/+1, which, again, also not quite the same thing. There's just so many simpler ways to write this that play almost exactly the same, that this is a really weird line of text. Gaining Exalted is like a 2-step process. Don't make your players do 2-step processes. Don't make your players go, oh, if I do A, then B happens, and B means C happens. Don't make them do that if B isn't an interesting step in and of itself. This is an A to B to C card when it could just be an A to C card with almost no change. Especially as an uncommon. Maybe as a rare, you get cards like the Angel that gives all your creatures Exalted. But anyways. Design 4, another unicycle, another equipment. Of course it is, because unicycle's an equipment. It's a 1 mana artifact equipment. Equipped creature has haste, menace, and attacks each combat if able. Its base toughness is 1. That is an awesome line of text. I love it. Like, it's on this unicycle, and it's wobbly, and it can't quite keep its balance, so it's really easy to kill. Haste. I don't believe you that a unicycle gives you haste. I mean, maybe a magic unicycle. I don't know how to use. I mean, presumably the person using this, the creature using the unicycle, is not trained in unicycle. I'm not trained in unicycle. I know that a unicycle would not give me haste. It would probably give me defender. Menace. Oh, I bet you I'm menacing on a unicycle. I'd be like, oh my god, what am I doing? And everyone would get out of my way because they don't want to get bowled over by an idiot on a unicycle. But that makes sense because I also have to attack each comp. I cannot control myself. It's ridiculous. I get it. I think the flavor here is amazing. It's a bit weird, but it's awesome. I also like that it's 1 and 1 and 1. There's lots of 1s on the unicycle. I'd look for slightly different set of abilities, but I think the key concept here is awesome. This line here, its base toughness is 1. Design number 5, Knife Thrower. It's a 2 and a red for creature human rogue 3/2. When card name enters the battlefield, exile the top 3 cards of your library face down. And whenever the Knife Thrower attacks, you get to. So I'm gonna paraphrase this text because it's important. What you get to do is you get to basically pick a target creature and then flip up the card from a face down at random, and then you deal that damage to the target. And the reason I clarify that is the order matters of how it happens, even though the text on the card implies it happens in the other order. You pick the target at the time the ability goes on the stack, and you don't know how much damage it's going to do until it resolves. So, and the thing is, we don't know if that was on purpose, and that's what makes judging this card hard. I'm going to talk about it from both angles. So if this wasn't on purpose, if the intention was to do it the other way, you can do that. You can say whenever card name attacks, turn a face down card face up when you do the thing. So you can do that. You can just write a reflexive trigger and you just avoid the issue. We have that technology and templating now. Conversely, if you like this effect, you should reword it so that it's obvious. So either way, this is a case of don't rely on your players knowing corner case confusing rules interactions. Just spell it out. Make it so that that's not an issue. So from just a design standpoint, like, I don't see how this is going to be fun if you have to pick a target before seeing how much damage it does. Like, that's not the kind of randomness that makes me enjoy a game. But I feel compelled to play this card as a spike because it's bonkers when it works. Like, there will be times where I play this card and it is a undercosted 4 for 1. Like, so I have to play it. It's kind of like, so Hearthstone has a similar thing. Hearthstone doesn't have randomness of its mana base, so it makes up for that by making its cards more random, and a lot of its highest rate cards historically are about randomness. So for a while there was a card called Knife Juggler. No, it's funny, but Knife Juggler, 2 mana, 3/2, that did 3 damage at random when it came into play. And there would be times you'd play that card and it would just completely destroy your own board. And there'd be times you'd play it and it would completely destroy your opponent's board. And high-level players were forced to play this super random card because it was super good when it worked, and it worked more often than it didn't just because you could set up for it and things like that. But it's not fun. People who like powerful cards tend to not like randomness. People who like randomness don't need powerful cards to make them fun. And this is fun in a way that even a player who likes randomness probably won't enjoy. Like, if I like randomness, I want to cast Chaos Warp or something like that basically creates who knows what happens crazy effects where I get to cast huge monsters for free and everybody gets to have fun in my big EDH game and things happen. But this doesn't do that. This just sometimes kills stuff, sometimes doesn't kill stuff. Attack with it, it dies because I didn't kill the blocker. That's no fun. Everybody cries a tear. So yeah, I don't like the version where you don't know how much damage it's doing. If you do flip the card face up first and then pick a target, the card is busted, and we just fix that with costing. I think it's an interesting card at that point. I would have made it a tap instead of a attack trigger. It makes it a little bit less powerful most of the time. It makes it less vulnerable, but it also fits, like, just from a concept standpoint. Why does the knife thrower have to attack to throw a knife? Anyways, I like where this card is going. It needs some work, but conceptually I think it's a nice flavorful trick, but just didn't quite come together. Juggling, this card's amazing. So it's a rare, costs 4 blue R enchantment. Card name enters the battlefield with 3 ball counters on it. At the beginning of your end step, draw a card for each ball counter on card name. If you have more cards in your hand than your maximum hand size, sacrifice card name and discard your hand. Otherwise, put a ball counter on card name. So basically what happens is I cast this first 6 mana, I draw 3 cards. And presumably I set myself up so like I at least get to do that. Next turn, I draw 4 cards, and as long as I don't have 7 cards, I'm good to go. And the next turn I draw 5 cards, and then 6, and so on and so forth. And at some point you're like, oh no, my hand is too full, I drop all the balls. Yeah, so there's no opportunity to like do anything with the cards before you sacrifice card names, so you'll never get to a point where you can draw 8 cards and not sacrifice this, but assuming you don't have like a maximum hand size enhancer, and I think this card should just say 7. I agree with the judges on that. But as both a Spike and a Jenny, I would really try to find a way to break this. Anything that let me discard cards, a deck full of cheap burn spells, and things like that, I would totally love to abuse this card. And I think it's probably one of those cards that there isn't really a safe mana cost for it. Any mana cost where it's fun to play, it's probably broken. And so this, unfortunately, is one of those designs that probably gets costed at like 9 mana ultimately, and nobody plays it, which is really sad because it's a cool design. I like the flavor. I totally get the flavor with juggling. Don't have a whole lot else to say there. Sawed in Half, great name, because he's a divisive magician. Get it? He cuts people in half. Yeah, if you... Reading the card explains the joke. 4 BB, creature, human, wizard, 2/4. When card name enters the battlefield, target player sacrifices a creature. Create 2 XX black horror creature tokens. Stay with me here. 1 where X is the sacrifice's power, and 1 where X is the sacrifice's toughness. That's too many X's. Like, X doesn't work that way. You have to, they gotta match up. That's not how algebra works, buddy. We would probably, it does technically probably work, but would definitely word it differently. We'd say create an XX token where X is this, and then create a YY token, or at least say create an XX token and have a separate clause. Wording aside, I just don't get the flavor. Like, somehow he cuts himself in half, and you get a 2/4 that turns into a 2/2 and a 4/4. Like, there's no situation I don't understand. Like, I cut a 3/3 in half and I get 2 3/3s. That's not how mitotic slime works. That's not how cutting things in half works. That's not how it works. We have cards that show how cutting in half works, and you have to half. And I don't understand why you didn't just go down that route. Create 2 XX black core creature tokens where X is half of the sacrificed creature's power. You know, yeah, it's not as unique, but sometimes you don't need to be unique. Sometimes being unique is just a way to make a card that's less exciting or doesn't work as well or is, otherwise cute for no benefit. Don't try to get cute. Things in Magic are done a certain way over and over and over for a reason. Don't not do those things just for the sake of being different. So yeah. And to be fair, like, I don't think there's any version of this that's actually a mythic rare. This feels like a rare at best. I like my mythics to be... basically, I like my mythics to blow out the game when cast in ideal circumstances, and, like, sure, this is a Necrotol that gets me 3 different creatures, but not usually going to be that amazing. It's not going to feel like a mythic when I play it. Design 8, Tightrope, mythic rare, 5 mana artifact. Creatures you control have vigilance. Interesting. I don't think of vigilance on a Tightrope. I think of standing still. That's defender. Creatures can't attack or block unless their power and toughness are equal. There's that balance thing again. Funny that 2 different designers came up with equal power or toughness as being balanced. 1, target creature you control gets either +1/+0 or +0/+1 until end of turn. This ability may be activated by any player and only during the beginning of combat step. And this is missing what I think is an important piece of reminder text, which is player playing the ability must control the creature being targeted. This is not an ability where your opponent can mess with your creatures. It's an ability where your opponent messes with their creatures and you mess with your creature. Setting that aside, this card is super fiddly, super busy, does a bunch of weird stuff, and I have no idea how it'd play out, and I have a feeling that my mind would just be like... I'd be like, I don't know what's going on here. This isn't fun. I'm doing a bunch of math and a bunch of calculation and a bunch of game state tracking. And like, what's the benefit? Is it's kind of like a weird combat preventer. That's not fun. And it's a mythic rare. Mythic rares aren't supposed to be fiddly math problems. They're supposed to be really exciting cards. This is probably a rare. It's probably too fiddly. And I understand why it says only during the beginning of combat step, because otherwise you could also use this to, like, attack and then fire breathe everything that wasn't blocked, but, like, or fire breathe things that are blocks that they trade, and that would create super mathy scenarios, but only beginning of combat step means, like, on the defense, I have to predict which creatures I'm going to want to be able to block with based on what I think you're going to attack with, and if I make something bigger so that I can block with it, now you're encouraged to make something of yours bigger before you attack with it, and we get in this sort of like weird priority war trying to one-up each other over and over and spend all our mana, and that's just super not fun. And I have to prepare for this a turn in advance by saving mana? What are you freaking kidding me? This is ridiculous. There's so much going on here. This is just like, this is not a mini game. If I want a mini game, this is not the mini game I want. I want Fact or Fiction as a mini game. I don't want this. Anyways, unfortunate miss, because I do see this part here is cool, and I understand you need the second ability in order to make that fair. But I would have come up with a different way to do that. So yeah, pretty cool. Let's move on. Let's make this just a little bit bigger now that I'm thinking about it, so that people can read the cards. So let's go on to J Treat. Challenge number 2, J Treat. So he has some comments. It's interesting. He talks about the return of a number of mechanics that he only uses once, which is nice, and I just set up your set. So Acrobatics. It's a 1W instant. Target creature gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn. Yeah, sure, that's Acrobatics. And then Rebound, so you get to do it again next turn. This is a really flavorful card. My concern, as many of the judges are, is I want to see, like... I'd want to see at least one more card with Rebound in order to convince me that Rebound is going to do anything else in this set besides be Acrobatics. Like, what I mean, I can come up with some ideas. Like rebound could be like encore, like crowd loved an act, so you got to do it again. Rebound could be like one-upmanship. It could be all sorts of things. So I can think of cards that do it. I just wish the designer had done it. But as a single card, this is a really cool card. I really like it. Unicycle. Haha, it's 0 this time. It's an equipment. Hint, hint. Unicycle, 0 artifact equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and can't be blocked by more than one creature. Equip 3. So, like, I don't know what they were going for here. I don't see how this makes sense as a unicycle. Like, I get the funny thing, like, haha, can't be blocked by more than one creature, unicycle. But you kind of missed the boat making it cost 0 and equip 3. Like, if you're going to play up the one theme, do it a little bit better, I guess. I don't know. The package falls apart for me. I don't see the package. And a lot of times, if you're trying to make a flavorful card, the package is way more important than one piece being cute. I don't know where else I would go with that. So design 3, Knife Thrower, uncommon, black. 2 and a black for a human rogue. 2/2. When Knife Thrower enters the battlefield, target creature an opponent controls gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each differently named rogue you control. So I don't remember. This is J Treat. I don't remember who did the rogues last week, but I don't think it was J Treat. I could be wrong. I apologize if I'm wrong. But there was somebody who did rogues last week, and the theme of rogues was differently named rogues, which I thought was a great theme. Either way, a little bit baffling to see it throw up here, because I think just counting rogues in general is totally fine. I don't see why this doesn't just count rogues. It's a cute line of text. I guess if you're trying to imply that that's how circuses work, that it's a bunch of different performers working together, but that also doesn't make sense. Like, all of the really cool sort of working together acts, it's like 10 acrobats or like 8 clowns or whatever. Like, so I don't know why it says differently named. That being said, other than that, it's a fine card. I would expect Knife Thrower as a common or uncommon to just do something like this. Like, I could see Knife Thrower, common, 2B, 2/2. When Knife Thrower enters the battlefield, target creature gets -1/-1 done. Nice and simple. Could be a counter, could be temporary, but that's what I would expect in a circus theme set. Another Tightrope, uncommon, 1 artifact. At the beginning of your end step, scry 1, sacrifice Tightrope unless you have cast a spell this turn. I love how this card says that I'm walking the tightrope. Like, I'm like, okay, scry 1, okay, can I get a spell for next turn? Great, found a spell. Okay, let's do it again, and again, and again, and again, and again. That being said, like, if I take a step back and think about it, like, that doesn't make sense of a tightrope. Like, it's a very metaphorical tightrope, but it's not a literal tightrope. Like, people don't, like, the way you work a tightrope is not by taking action over and over and over consistently. It's actually the opposite. Like, it's balance. You're trying not to do anything, and when you do it, it's very tightly controlled. Like, it's almost like this should say, sacrifice tightrope unless you cast exactly 1 spell this turn, which obviously is way worse, but that could be cool. You could get a different reward. I would expect tightropes to generally work with creatures and not spells, though. I think that's the biggest flavor miss here. It's a cool card. Something like this is a very cool card. It's not a tightrope. So take this cool concept and put it on a different card. Traveling Circus, rare. 2 blue R. Enchantment Aura. Enchant creature. Enchanted creature has haste. Whenever Traveling Circus enters the battlefield or you cast a spell, gain control of enchanted creature until end of turn and untap it. So this is just freaking control magic. It's control magic with a lot of words. It's control magic with a lot of weird conditions attached to it. It's control magic that gives the creature haste, but takes a bit of work to maintain. I don't. And so the judges rightly call out that this is more the flavor of, like, running away with the circus, not the circus itself traveling. But even if you look past this, like, this card, I don't like control magics, generally speaking. They're almost always oppressive and not fun. And making a control magic cheaper is just asking for trouble. Anytime you make a control magic cheaper, you're just creating a card that's going to be either more oppressive or just terrible. So I don't like this card. Feats of Strength, rare, 1 GG sorcery. Choose a different mode for each of up to 3 target creatures you control. So basically, what it really does is, this is really more like Seeds of Strength. You could just read it as 3 abilities. Put a +1/+1 counter on up to 1 target creature. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control, and destroy target artifact or enchantment with converted mana cost less than or equal to that creature's power. That part's in brackets. I don't know what they were trying to communicate there. But this is a really busy card. I don't know if it would actually work. Let's pretend like it does. It really screams to be cycled out. Like, this is the kind of thing that you wouldn't write this line of text. You wouldn't write this line of text on a card unless you were going to have multiple cards like that. I think it's just saying it's screaming to be cycled out. But I really like conceptually what's being done, mechanically what's being done here. I like the idea of forcing you to do 3 different things with 3 different creatures. I'm not sure that, and even though you don't technically need to write it as a modal spell, I think writing it as a modal spell, sometimes wording and templating and things like, you know, these little bullet points, like those little tiny things, formatting of the card, can go a long way towards making or breaking a concept, whether or not the mechanical concept or the flavor concept comes together or just dissolves into a pile of mush. So mechanically, I think this is a cool card. Flavorfully, sure, the second and third feel like feats of strength. The first one feels like becoming strong in order to perform those feats of strength. I'll give you a pass on that. I think the biggest concern is just, is this a rare? It's a rare mechanically, it's a rare from its verbosity and its complexity, but a card that makes a card get a counter and fight a creature, like these 2 lines, that's a freaking common. We print that at common all the time. And this line being attached at best makes it an uncommon. I don't know, that's my opinion. Rosella, Trapeze Artist, a mythic rare, 1 RR, legendary creature, human rogue, 2/3 haste. Whenever Rosella attacks, exile the top card of your library and you may cast that card. Then, whenever you cast a card, Rosella gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. Rosella has flying as long as its power is 5. You know, I fell asleep reading this card. It's got so much text trying to figure out what it's doing. I understand what it's doing. I'm being a little bit snarky, but like this line of text feels a little bit over the top from a mechanical standpoint. I also don't understand why a red creature is gaining flying, not just any red creature, but a really red creature, 1 RR. I don't know. There's a lot going on here. And it's another one of those A to B to C cards where at least in this case, like A, B, C, and D are all interesting things. Like A, I want to attack, great. B, I get to cast a card for free, cool. C, it gets +X/+0, cool. D, if now you're a power 5 or greater, it has flying. It's just so many steps. Reduce some of, like, they're all cool steps, but like it's just too many steps, buddy. Like, come on. There's a gem here. There's a seed in here somewhere, but it's just a little bit too much. I don't know what I would do with it. I feel like it could be fine missing 1 or more lines of text here. It's probably got some blue in it because of the flying, because of what it's doing. I don't know. I feel like there's something here. It's just not quite there. Pyramus the Magician, mythic rare, 2 UU, legendary creature, human rogue, 2/2. When Pyramus the Magician enters the battlefield, create a 1/1 blue illusion creature token and draw a card. Sacrifice an illusion. You may cast Pyramus the Magician from the battlefield for its mana cost. Okay, so this is another example of writing a really weird line of text for such little gain. Like, the difference between casting this from the battlefield, which basically means taking it from the battlefield, putting it on the stack, and putting it back into battlefield. Like, the difference between that and, like, exiling it and putting it on the battlefield, just something we do all the time, or just making the illusion token and drawing a card again, like, the differences are so subtle that it really needs to justify itself, and nothing else justifies this here. So, I mean, I could totally see a card where you may cast cards from the battlefield is a line of text, but I would expect to have a reason, and I don't see the reason here. This is just not pulling its weight, and it's a really complicated concept in the rules, and as a player I would read this and say, what does this even mean? What do you mean cast from the battlefield? Like, it's already in play. Does it just, like, do nothing? Yeah. And I don't know how to... I mean, obviously this could just say sacrifice an illusion, exile Pyramus, and return it to play. Well, it would have to be 2 UU, comma, sacrifice an illusion. But then it's just a weird fog machine, like you're just paying 2 UU to block 2 creatures and then fog, which isn't really appropriate for blue, and it's not that exciting anymore. It's not a mythic rare, really. So yeah, I don't really know how to save this, because I don't know how to make this line of text do something that makes it worth it. I just can't think of an example. I'd love to know what it is, but it's just not here. Anyways, so that's all of their cards. Some pretty cool cards. I really liked a few of their ideas. So let's move on to Jeremy Geist. Challenge number 2. Trapeze Artist. I love this card. So it's a common. It says it's a creature, human, 2 and a W for a 2/3. When Trapeze Artist attacks, target creature you control gains flying until end of turn. And you say, Alexis, that's a card we print in every set. Every set has the I attack, creature gains flying. The thing that this card has different about it, and that the judges rightfully called out, is that pretty much every time we do that card, the creature itself already has flying. So what you can do is you can attack with your flyer, give something else flying, and it attacks too, and they both kind of jump over your opponent's defenses. This card is different in that, 1, it doesn't already have flying, but 2, it can give itself flying. So at a base level, it's it jumps itself, so it's kind of like a Wild Griffin, and then later on you give something else flying and you kind of throw it over your opponent's defenses, and the 2/3 kind of suicide attacks in. And both of those are completely different from how Pegasus Courser plays. Totally different from how our normal version of this plays. Like, missing the flying completely changes the card. One word. So I love this design. I love how a tiny, subtle tweak that not all players will even see initially changes the entire way this plays. Now, that might be a drawback. Most players will probably assume this flies to begin with, and that will lead to some feel-bad moments where they go, what? They go, what? I don't believe it did that. It kind of sucks. I think the card is really cool. I'd love to play with this card. I'm a little disappointed that the judges basically either said, like, typically I like these to have flying, why doesn't it have flying? Or nothing new here. It's like, interesting. So Traveling Circus, sorcery, G, it's a common. As an additional cost for Traveling Circus, sacrifice a land. Ooh. Search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield, tap, shuffle your library, draw a card. So this is a G cantrip that basically changes one of your lands into a different land. So, like, this is costed properly. It's a fair card, but the judges rightfully call out that this is a lot of busy work. You're sacrificing something, you're searching your library, you're shuffling it, you got to make a decision, then you have to finish shuffling your card before you can draw. You can't really like shuffle and then say, hey opponent, take your turn while I draw a card, because usually you'll need to draw your card before you know if you're done. It just slows the whole game down for basic mana fixing compared to most of our mana fixing. It doesn't accelerate you. And also just the fact that you sacrifice a land means that if I counter this, I'm down a land, which is really a feel bad. I don't want my opponent syncopate to become Stone Rain. That's just a terrible feeling. And then I'm down the land and I'm down the card. So, like, syncopate becomes a 2-for-1 on this card, which is just not cool. So how to fix this? There's lots of ways to fix that. You could have it sacrifice it on resolution, so that fixes the syncopate problem. Could have it mill yourself until you get a basic land and use that basic land, so it's a little bit different. Usually, though, cards like this, we just make auras. I forget what the name of the card is off the top of my head, but there's a card, recent memory, yeah, here it is, Abundant Growth. Like, Abundant Growth is just a much cleaner execution of this. It does virtually the same thing. It's actually just strictly better in pretty much every way, except for it being slightly more vulnerable to things like Naturalize. So, yeah. I'm not going to comment on the flavor. I don't know how I feel about it. I haven't decided. I could see arguments both ways. Feats of Strength. Instant. 6G. Feats of Strength costs X less to cast, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So that's a cool line of text. It's kind of like Gisela. What is it? Gazala? I don't remember how. Let's do Elder Dinosaur, because that's the important part about these cards, is that they're Elder Dinosaurs. So you've got Galta. Sorry, I'm mixing cards up. Galta, kind of a similar space. I'll note that that is a legendary Elder Dinosaur rare, and this is an uncommon. So the payoff's not going to be nearly as cool. In this case, we get 2+1/+1 counters. That's quite a difference in payoff. I feel like the only way this line of text works is if this is something you're doing several times in the set, so it's kind of a mini theme that you can build around. So you can do things like make Giant Growth a Dark Ritual, which is kind of cool. I've done that with Galta before. But it's not, because it's Feats of Strength, and this is clearly supposed to be a flavorful thing. And I get it. It's a cool flavor. It's saying, if the stronger my creature, the easier it is to do this Feat of Strength. And the Feat of Strength is something else gets stronger. Like, this payoff is both kind of underwhelming and just a weird flavor. Yeah, so I don't really know where to go with this. I think I would take this line of text and focus on that and try to figure out how to make the best card you can make with that line of text. Maybe multiple cards with that line of text. That's what I would do with this. Knife Thrower. It's a Vampire Rogue, 3B, 1/1. Knife Thrower enters the battlefield with 2+1/+1 counters. You can remove a +1/+1 counter from it to give a creature -1/-1 until end of turn. Activate only when you can play a sorcery. So, yeah, this is a pretty derivative design, which is fine. Don't get me wrong. Commons and uncommons should be derivative designs, probably half or more of the time, frankly. But that's not what this test is testing. This test is the Great Designer Search. You get 8 cards. You probably shouldn't do too many derivative designs. I did find it interesting. Mark Rosewater said, let's put some mana on the activation. As a general rule, I like to have shield down moments. Which I found a little bit interesting, because I feel like activate this ability only when you can play a sorcery is a shield down moment. Like, if it's my turn, I can kill your Knife Thrower. Your shields are down. Can't stop me. Anyways. Yeah, I don't have much else to say about this card. I think it's totally appropriate flavorfully. I would totally expect to see this card in a set. It's just not telling me you're a great designer. It's telling me you're a decent designer. It's telling me you know what cards already exist and which ones you can match the card to the flavor, and that's cool. We need that. We need to see new stuff too. 3 rings, a rare. Enchantment to you. When 3 rings enters the battlefield, exile the top 3 cards of your library. If you would draw a card instead, put a card you own that was exiled by 3 rings into your hand, then exile the top card of your library. This is basically a really weird way of... This is like a really weird Sensei's Divining Top that shows your opponent everything that's going on. So every turn, I basically get to... It's not really scribe because I can't put them on the bottom. Every turn I get to rearrange the top 3 cards in my library and then draw whichever one I want, and I can do that forever, but my opponent gets to see, and I'm, kind of brainstorm locked. Like, that's the worst part about cards like this. Like, forget like that, forget that this card's been done, forget the part where my opponent can see the stuff I'm doing. I hate cards like this, because you cast them, and then you're like, oh, these all suck. So now I've got, let's say I exile 3 lands, and now basically I'm just forced to take a land next time. That feels bad, and then I'm forced to take whatever new card comes up every time, because I just don't want those silly lands that I've exiled. And like, I agree, it's not technically any different than having Divination just have drawn 2 cards, but it feels way worse. I didn't even realize that. So like, this card is almost strictly worse than divination. If I pay 2U and draw 2 cards, I've now the same depth into my library every turn as this card would have put me, except my opponent doesn't get to see all my freaking cards. So yeah. I don't know if there's a way to salvage this card in a way that's interesting. It feels like a case where an interesting idea was had, which is great. That's where all designs start. You start with something intriguing, like, I wonder if I could make this work. And they wrote it out, and then they ended up with a card that isn't actually that interesting in terms of the actual gameplay, or doesn't do anything that new. But they left it because they found a new and exciting way to write an old ability. And sometimes that works out. Sometimes you find a new and exciting way to write an old ability, and it's slightly and subtly different in a way that makes it completely different. For example, Trapeze Artist. Trapeze Artist is an ability we've seen everywhere before, and it plays completely different. But I think this one misses on that, so that's unfortunate. Clown Car, I love these cards. Clown Car, it's a rare artifact. X. Clown Car enters the battlefield with X counters. At the beginning of your upkeep, remove a troop counter, that's what they're called, troop counters, from Clown Car. If you do, create a 1/1 red clown creature token, and you can spend 2 mana to put a troop counter on Clown Car. So it's basically like Walking Ballista, but in Clown Car form. Sorry, not Walking Ballista, Hangerback Walker in Clown Car form. Hangerback Clown Car. This is weird. I don't know how I feel. Like it's weird that it, on one hand, it kind of feels weird that it pops them out one by one, but that kind of makes sense, because if you've ever seen a clown car, like, you're like, and then another clown, and another clown, and another clown, and like, so this would be kind of the same way, and you can just keep paying mana to make it yet another clown and yet another clown, which is kind of crazy. It's like, I thought there was only 3 clowns in there. Just kidding. There's 4 clowns in there. Now there's 5 clowns in there. I love this card. It's a little weird that Clown Car is not a vehicle, but I can forgive it. I think this card is pretty cool. I don't know if it would be fun to play. Yeah, I have to think about that, because in a lot of ways you could think of this as a 1 mana enchantment with a upkeep of 2 mana that creates a 1/1 clown every turn. So it's kind of like a bad Bitter Blossom. And Bitter Blossom is a ridiculous card, so that's fine. Making a worse version of Bitter Blossom is not a problem. It's a little weird for red. You can always elect not to pay. You can pay more upfront. There's a lot of things going on here. I think I like it. I think I like it a lot. I think the only weird thing to me is that the card can be empty for a turn or two, and then you can start pumping mana back into it, so it kind of just sits there. Yeah, I'd be interested to see how this card played. It might be terrible, it might be bonkers, but I don't know. That's good. I like it when I don't know how a card's going to play when I first read it. That's sometimes a really good sign. You want some number of cards that are more powerful than they read, or less powerful than they read. Redundo the Magician, mythic rare, legendary creature, human wizard, 2 URW for a 2/2. Whenever you cast a spell, you may activate one of these. R, Redundo deals 2 damage to target player. 1U, return target creature to its owner's hand. Or 2W, create 2 1/1 white bird creature tokens with flying. So we've got another magician that makes things vanish and creates birds, and also randomly zaps players, because I guess magicians, doing lightning bolts and stuff. That's weird, because you've got like the overlap between circus magicians, which are about putting on a show, prestidigitation, poof, cool things happen, wah! And you've got the, fantasy magicians that are like zap you. And this is kind of like a weird combination of those two. I find that, I'm not sure how I feel about that. Kind of, it's almost kind of like that little dark secret, like, in this world, it's a circus world, but still magicians, and they can zap you. So yeah, I think I like the flavor a lot. I think it's a neat trigger. I'm not sure if this works in the rules. Let's pretend it does. But again, this is another case of saying, you know what? Writing it this way is 90% of making this card exciting. I don't think this card is nearly exciting if you had to write all these words out in a way that didn't get to use these bullet points and be a modal ability. So, and I think that's cool. Like, we do that you know, every few sets you do something like that. Sagas are kind of the latest example of that. I don't think sagas could be nearly as exciting or interesting if they didn't have the neat, you know, frame where you've got the stuff on the left and the art on the right, and the stuff on the left is like, you know, 1, 2, 3 with actual Roman numerals. Like that just, the cards aren't cool without that. So this is cool. I'd like to see more of these. I would not want to write the rules for just one card. But I love this card. I love everything about this card. Maybe it's too good, I don't know. Don't care. It's an awesome card. Design 8, Human Cannonball. Mythic Rare, Enchantment, 3 RRR. You can't cast spells. Well, there's a line of text. That's what I want to read on my cards. You can't cast spells. Is this form of the squirrel? Let's move on. Form of Human Cannonball. At the beginning of your end step, if you didn't cast Human Cannonball this turn, sacrifice it. Oh good, I get to get rid of that drawback. If you do, Human Cannonball deals 5 damage to each creature target opponent controls and 5 damage to you. What? Hold on, so I can't cast spells for a turn. Then I gotta sacrifice my enchantment, and then it deals 5 damage to me. That's a lot of work. And I paid 6 mana for this clunker. Alright, what did it do that's cool? One-sided Wrath of God. Okay, well that's kind of cool. 5 damage to each creature target opponent controls. But wow, that's an expensive price. Like, at Mythic Rare, like we've printed cards at Mythic Rare that just do 5 damage to each creature target opponent controls, like, period. Like, I don't remember the name, give me a second here, but there's, choose a color. There's a red spell, Sudden Demise. Like, Sudden Demise is like the good version of this. I can just spend 6 mana up front, do 5 damage to all of your creatures because your creatures are a different color than mine. I know it's not literally the same thing, but like, just look at the rates. And so the payoff, it's amazing because I think that this sort of like, I have 1 turn, and you have 1 turn to prepare for this, I can't do anything, go. Like, that's cool. This is really cool. Payoff's not there. And I think the designer knows the payoff's not there. I think I saw them tweeting on Twitter saying, I wish I'd taken this to 11 and come up with a payoff that actually justified this and was more flavorful. So yeah. The nice thing is, with design and collaboration and teamwork, like, someone would come up with this portion, and someone else would say, that's kind of interesting, where can we take it? And you'd iterate on this portion, and hopefully you'd come up with something really cool. Or maybe you wouldn't, and you'd eventually scrap it, but that's okay too. Sometimes not everything works. Not every idea turns into something amazing. You gotta accept that, and you gotta let them go. So, Linus, what do we got here for your challenge number 2, Linus? So yeah, another tightrope. It's a common. Oh, I'm excited to see what a tightrope at common does. So it's 2B for an aura. It enchants a creature, and when enchanted creature becomes untapped, destroy it. Okay, so like the flavor makes sense to me. The guy is on a tightrope and he falls off and he dies. It's a little weird that I just take this random creature and go, whoop, you're up on a tightrope because I enchanted you. The flavor kind of falls apart there for me. But that's cool. I could kind of see it as like maybe 2B just global enchantment. Whenever a creature becomes tapped, sacrifice this and destroy that creature. So it's kind of like a standstill for creatures. Whoever taps first dies. That probably would play miserably. But yeah, so the main comment from the judges that I agree with is like, this is just a weird way to do assassinate. I don't think that makes it bad. I think it's okay. Like, removal, especially at common, doing tiny variations on existing cards is how we make new cards. This is how we've designed Magic cards. So I don't have a problem with this card. I think this card could totally see play in a set. I probably would have costed it at things off there. I probably would have costed it at 1B, give the player kind of an upgrade on Assassinate for a card that's not quite as flexible. Is that true? Or is this card just strictly better than Assassinate? No, it's strictly better than Assassinate, so yeah, this is fine. Well, yeah, I think the flavor is a little bit of a stretch, but for commons, sometimes you gotta do that. Stilts, another common. 1 mana, artifact equipment. I'll note that stilts also are equipment. Stilts are not a vehicle, even though they provide conveyance. Equipped creature has reach. That makes sense. I'm up on stilts. Whenever equipped creature attacks, you may unattach stilts. If you do, that creature trips, falls, and flies through the air. Just kidding. If you do that, creature gains flying until end of turn. And equips 2. So This card is not exciting. That's really the most I have to say about it. That's like the most important thing. We have cards that for around this cost just straight up grant flying, like a 1-mana equipment for 2 equipment. For a 1-mana equipment that equipped for 2 that granted flying, I think, let me see if that's how Cobbled Wings is. That card is, it's the opposite, it's actually even better. It's 2 mana to put out and 1 to equip. Equip creature has flying. So this card is like, and that card, this card isn't even a card you play. Like, you play it, you know, you might play this in your dinosaur deck, but it's not a high draft pick. It's a playable card, but it's not an exciting card, and it often sits in your sideboard. And this card seems like it's just way worse. Like, anyways, but that's partly a development issue. So, but it's so far off that like it makes me wonder. Like, even as a designer, you need to understand that your cards need to have appealing rates, and that the playtesters aren't going to really enjoy them or play them depending on what kind of playtest it is if the rate isn't close to real. So you got to be within like 1 mana if possible. It's something to practice. It's worth it. It goes in the other direction too, because you don't want a card that's really good because it's undercosted and that's the only reason it's appealing. You don't want your skill as a designer to be, I can design cards that cost 1 less mana than they should cost, and that gets you excited. So this, it goes in both directions. I don't know what I would do to save this card. It doesn't make sense to me as stilts, because I don't know how you vault yourself into the air with stilts. Is that a thing? I've never seen that in a circus. Maybe that's a thing. Yeah, I feel like some sort of unblockability, like can't be blocked except by creatures with flying, might make sense. That's a little bit, at that point, if you have reach and can't be blocked by creatures except with flying, it's like flying but with a lot of words, so I don't know. Fire Eating, uncommon, 1R instant. Card name deals 1 damage to target creature if that creature would deal damage this turn. Instead, it deals double that much damage. Create a red enchantment token named Crowd's Zeal with sacrifice this. Target creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. Sacrifice this only as a sorcery. So there's 2 things going on here. The first card is basically 1R instant. Deal a damage to target creature. That creature gains double strike this turn. I know it's not technically that, but let's just assume it has those words because that makes this simpler. That card's a little bit... It's interesting. I don't know if it's too good or not. I don't know what the rate on target creature gets double strike is. I think it's 1R nowadays. I think it's 2R. Maybe it's 1R. But what makes this card interesting is it gives you basically... It's kind of like a clue token, but for +1/+1. So the thing I don't like is the clue token, the Crowd's token, you only sacrifice it as a sorcery, but this is an instant. So that's like, there's some non-bow synergy right there that bothers me. I understand why it's only as a sorcery. But it does make me worry about how those interactions would happen. And obviously writing this line of text is strongly implying that this line of text will exist on lots of cards. And if it exists on lots of cards, we'd probably keyword it, kind of like investigate. Or sorry, that's technically a keyword action. Anyways, we'd keyword it. And I think this has some potential as a keyword. I think having they're sort of like mobile tokens, or sorry, mobile counters. You get a +1/+1 counter, but you don't have to spend it right now. You can wait until you have a better target. And so you can have interesting cards like, you know, Attune with Ether, the one that gives you 2 energy and searches for a land. You can do that, but instead it gives you one of these tokens and searches for a land. So you could do it on turn 1, go get a land, and then later play a creature and put the counter on the creature post hoc. So that's kind of cool. I'd like to see that mechanic. It might be interesting. I'd like to explore that mechanic, is really all I have to say. And I see how that ties into Circus. So that part excites me. The first part I could take or leave. It's kind of... It's flavorful, but... It's not that exciting. It's just a new take on a slight variation on an existing card that we see all the time. Design 4, Trained Elephant, uncommon, 1 GW, creature elephant, 3/3. You may have card name attack in a pair with another creature you control. When you do, both creatures gain lifelink and trample until end of turn. So attack in a pair, good old banding, right? It's not actually banding. It's a it's an interesting like crossover between banding and soul bond. I like it. I don't know. Let's pretend like the rules work. Let's pretend like the reason you wrote this was because the implication is that you can't attack with the same creature in more than one pair, because otherwise you'd just say when card name attacks, choose target creature. If you do, this creature and that creature gain lifelink and trample until end of turn, or something like that. You wouldn't need this weird text. So this text means something. Which means you'd have to have a parenthetical, because even though it means something, I don't think it's an intuitive something. So now you're starting to kind of lose some of the coolness now. I don't think it's intuitive what attack in a pair means. Do I have to block them in a pair? Like, probably not, but why not? That doesn't make any sense. I think you lose a lot. You quickly lose a lot of the coolness once you have to start explaining what this means. That being said, maybe there's a way to make it work. I would definitely want to explore that in a circus-like set. Let's explore the whole trainer-trainee concept, the whole like acrobatic duo, ringmaster plus performer, like all of those kind of paired up interactions. Like circus is very much about performers building off of each other and acts building on top of each other. So I totally get that. I think that's a really cool way to explore that. I just don't think this is the right execution necessarily. The end result, both creatures gain lifelink and trample until the end of turn. Sure, I get trample for an elephant. I don't get lifelink. Doesn't really matter. That's not the point that's trying to be done here. Attack in a pair is the point that's trying to be done here, and I think there's a seed of something there, but I'm not sure this found the final version. Lion Tamer. 3WW, creature human, 2/2. When Lion Tamer enters the battlefield, create a 5/5 white cat creature token. Wow, that's a big cat. That is maybe the biggest cat we've ever printed. Okay, we gotta find out. This is important. This is super important. Sorted by power. Other direction. Okay, so yeah, we have a couple big cats, but not a whole lot. Like, we're talking about legends and, actual legends and elemental cats and all sorts of crazy stuff. So yeah, okay, we've had 5/5 cats before, but I don't think they've ever been like non-sentient lions. It's a little bit weird. Anyways, that's a tangent. So you've created a 5/5 cat. What do you do with that cat? Well, you can have Lion Tamer attack in a pair with another creature you control. Any creature. Let's just say maybe it's a cat. Maybe it's a 5/5 cat. So when you do, both creatures gain first strike until end of turn. So now you've got 7 power of first strike attacking for 5 mana. That's pretty dope. That's a lot of first strike power. Yeah, this card kind of falls in the uncanny valley of rare for me, where I understand why it's rare, because it needs to be rare for the rate and what it would do in limited, but I don't ever want to own this card. Like, what do I do with this card? I mean, maybe I put it, like, I think the only salvaging bit of this is the cat part. Like, if I've got a cat treble deck, this card's like, I make a 5/5 cat. You want that, right? That's cool, huh? But let's do that on a card that's exciting for everybody. Like, let's not make a card that's just, overpowered for the sake of being overpowered and doesn't actually do anything interesting, but it's overpowered in a way that is just power and toughness. Like, nobody's going to play this. I shouldn't say nobody. It might see play in Constructed just because that's a lot of power and toughness, but it's not exciting. And if it misses, you've got a Mahamoti Djinn. I do not like Mahamoti Djinns. I don't like cards that are just big, fat, dumb monsters that are good and limited and terrible everywhere else, and nobody plays them and they're not interesting. Sorry, I didn't mean to bag on this card. That came out really poorly, but I just hate those kinds of cards, and this card really, really skirts the line, if not crossing it, in my mind. I do like the attack in a pair concept. Again, we have 2 cards with it. I'm a little surprised they did 2 cards with attack in a pair. I don't think the second design adds anything to their submission, so I'm a little surprised. I don't have much else to say. It's a little weird that it's a lion tamer, but you can pair with anything. But yeah, let's move on. Acrobatics. It's a rare 4 UU instant. Exchange control of 2 target creatures. Also exchange their positions in combat. I have no idea what this card does. Literally no idea. I'd have to think about it and then think some more. Think about it some more. Think, are there enough situations where this is worth playing? I mean, exchanging control of 2 creatures is pretty powerful on by itself. I think the going rate for that is 5 mana sorcery, if I remember correctly. So what does this do if one of those creatures is in combat? Like, I guess it works, because if I'm giving you a creature and it was blocking, this new creature's yours, so it can block 2. It's a little weird. I don't know. Does it mean I can like attack with my 1/1 flyer and then steal your big fatty, and now your big fatty's attacking you, but you've already had a chance to block and you missed? Like, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, okay. The more I think about it, the more I like it, but it did take a lot of work to get there, and that's not a space that you get to play with a lot as a designer. You get, in my mind, 2, maybe 3 cards a set, and rare is the right place for it. I don't want this at Mythic Rare. I don't want this at Uncommon or Common. I want this at Rare. I think Rare is the place where you get to make a player think a lot. Make them go, I don't know if this is good. I don't know if this is good. How does this work? What does this even mean? How does this work? Okay, now that makes sense. Okay. You don't do it at Mythic Rare because you want your Mythic Rares to be really appealing on first read because they're Mythic Rares, and you want your Uncommons and Commons to be the backbone of Limited, so they also shouldn't have this problem. So Rare's the right place for this. Acrobatics? I don't know. Let's pretend it wasn't called Acrobatics and this was just a nameless rare. That's a cool rare. I'd like to see this card. I'd be excited to try and see if this card actually plays interestingly. Is it Acrobatics? Probably not. This doesn't. That part doesn't make sense to me. Marvola Circus Magician, Mythic Rare, 1 UR, Legendary Creature, Human Wizard, 2/2 Haste. Whenever card name attacks, you may exile the top 3 cards of your library face down. You may look at those cards. Until end of turn, you may cast them. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, draw a card. So, the rate is insane. 1 UR, 2/2 Haste. So, like, for 3 mana, I get to draw 3 cards and cast them this turn if I want to. That's Active Impulse right there. That's a 2R card all by itself. But this is attached to a 2/2 haste creature, so it's possibly hitting my opponent, possibly trading with a creature. If it hits my opponent, I get to do it again next turn. Also, unlike Active Impulse, I can pay the mana up front. And it has haste, but I can wait a turn. I can be like, no haste. I love it. I love it when I cast a haste creature and I don't attack with it. That's a great feeling. That was sarcasm. But I can cast it, and then next turn attack with it when I have all my mana up. And so it's like a delayed Active Impulse. And I maintain that Active Impulse would be a much better card if it had Suspend 1. So in fact, we did that card. What was it called? Commune with Lava. Because it was an instant, you could do it at your opponent's end step and then on your turn cast those cards. And this card was actually pretty good in Limited. It never quite made it into Constructed, but it wouldn't have surprised me if it had. So this card does a lot of bonkers thing, and I haven't even gotten to the last ability. The last ability, somehow, even though you've already drawn 3 cards a turn, it says draw a card on it. It's a little bit interesting. Now, I do like the line of text. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell that targets a creature you control, draw a card. Great. I love that line of text. Let's just take that line of text. That feels pretty close to Magician all by itself. Maybe needs a little bit tweaking. Maybe instant or sorceries that target creatures you control cost 1 less. Maybe scry 1 during your upkeep. I don't know. Something else to kind of add just a little bit of power. But this is the ability I want to build a deck around. I want to build the deck that's full of pump spells and auras and make my guy hexproof, which is things I want to be doing anyways, and I get to do free draw cards. Like, I want to play this card in Boggles, I want to play this card in Infect. That's great. Don't give me this on top of that. I don't need that. This card is doing 2 things. It only needs to do 1 thing. So that's really the lesson here. You only need to do 1 thing with your cards. The second thing, save for a different card. It's a thing that, and I'm not saying that the GDS designers are doing this all the time or even that much, but if you're an amateur designer, that's something to watch out for. Don't try to make a card that does everything all at once. Anyways. So design 8. Marnaby. That's a weird name. Marnaby? I'm not judging you, but really, Marnaby? Marnaby Ringmaster, Mythic Rare. 4 GW, Planeswalker. 5 Loyalty. It's +2 to untap all creatures you control and put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control. Or 0 to search your library for a creature card, remove loyalty counters from card name equal to that card's converted mana cost, and if you do, put the card on the battlefield. And -10 to get an emblem with, at the beginning of your end step, search your library for a creature card and put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. So 2 things jump out immediately. 1, searching libraries is something that we don't want on constructed level cards very often. We don't want the best decks in standard, or ideally any format, but we have less control over that. The best decks in standard shouldn't be about searching your library for the same card every game and producing the same experience every game by casting the same rare every game, or things like that. Now, it does lead to some interesting play where you have a toolbox and your deck has a bunch of little one-ofs, and you're like, well, this time I want this card and this time I want that card. I love playing those decks, but it almost never works out that way. It almost always turns out that it's going to be, 0, search your library for Torrential Gearhulk, win the game. 0, search your library for Torrential Gearhulk, win the game. Every game you're going to do the same thing. So yeah, I don't know. The problem is, of course, that you've got your emblem also does the same thing. So that was the second issue. You've got 2 abilities that both tutor and put things into play. And that's, I don't want to say lazy, but it's kind of lazy. It's kind of like I couldn't think of a cool thing to do that, I couldn't think of a third thing to intermingle with my other 2 things, so I just did the second thing again. I can't even think of the last time we did that. I'm sure we've done that on Planeswalkers, and I'm not saying you can't do that, but it's not, it feels like a missed opportunity. And the first ability is just, I get the Ringmaster feel, cool. Ringmaster pumps everybody, gets them all going, gives them pseudo-vigilance, makes them bigger, but it's also just a fairly generic, a Johnny-like ability. It's fine. This searching for creatures is the main thing this card does, and that's, unfortunately, not that exciting. It's exciting from a Spike perspective, but I don't like it as a designer. Moving on to the second to last, we have Ryan Siegel-Stelcher. Stechler. Let's see what we got here. So design number 1, Magician at common. We have 4U for a creature, human wizard, 2/3. When Magician enters the battlefield, choose 1. Create a 1/1 white rabbit creature token, or return target creature or vehicle to its owner's hand. Cool, I love this design. It's maybe a little bit complicated for common, but not in a way that we wouldn't do. You can have commons that are this complex, we do them, but you're using up a little bit of extra complexity. You wouldn't want all your commons to be this complex. Some things I would do to this card, for starters, I'd just remove the or vehicle. I think that's unnecessary. That's a couple words you don't really need. The other, I like it's a white rabbit, a blue card making a white rabbit. It's kind of silly, but I love. That's the kind of little gimmick that I like on my cards. So this gives it bonus points in my mind. Some of the judges call out that making a 1/1 token versus returning a creature aren't equivalent effects, but I'm not gonna lie, I actually like that. I like that there's almost always going to be an obviously correct option, and that as a spike, there's going to be times that the obvious option isn't actually the correct option. A lot of times I'm going to want to say, okay, I play 5 mana, I bounce your dude, and I attack. And as a spike, it really excites me that sometimes I'm going to make the opposite play where I'm going to be like, well, I could bounce your creature and attack for 5 and try to race you. But I've read the game, and I recognize that you're just going to spend your next turn recasting it, and I'm never going to be able to attack again, and we're going to hit a board stall. And what I'm actually trying to do is overwhelm you later, or I'm trying to just stall by blocking your creatures. And so this 1/1 token is actually just better. So I think it's actually got a lot of interesting interplay. You could make it a slightly bigger token or something, but I don't care. I think it's fine. Design number 2, Flaming Hoop, common, R, instant. Flaming Hoop deals 3 damage to target creature that entered the battlefield this turn. And it's got amazing flavor text. It says, well, folks, it looks like she didn't quite make it through. I don't know what that means. It's like jumping through the hoop, and you like land on the hoop instead. Oh, crap, that's gotta suck. The judges bring up the good point that this is basically red essence scatter. It's basically R, counter target creature spell with with toughness 3 or less. I don't like that. I don't like red having counter spells. But the reason I don't like red having counter spells isn't even necessarily because of color pie. I think color pie is super important, and it's super important that you don't bend the color pie in ways that blur what makes one color one thing and one color another. You don't want red to play like blue, because that completely makes Magic a mishmash of nothingness. But the reason I don't like this is because when I draw this card, I'm like, I want to kill that creature. Oh wait, I can't kill that creature. And that's not how red plays. Red draws Lightning Bolt and it's like, kill that thing. So yeah, I don't know if there's a way to save this card. It's a really cool line of text that I just don't like the end result of, so I don't know how to save this card. Design 3, Feats of Strength, uncommon, 2G, sorcery, choose target creature you control. If it has the greatest power, draw a card. If it has the greatest toughness, draw a card. If it has the greatest converted mana cost, draw a card. I love this card. I think this is amazing. Pretend like it probably should cost 4 mana at least, because Harmonize for 3 mana is really good. It's interesting that it's choose target creature, not just if you control the greatest power. That card would be way better, obviously. This card's super risky, and I don't like it being super risky. Like, I don't like the gameplay of, I have to wait until you can't kill my creature in order to do this cool thing. Some things force that, like auras kind of require you to do that, but let's not do that when you don't have to do that. It could just say choose a creature you control and not be targeted. It would still be a fine card. I think that would just be better. But watch out for that. Watch out for like the side effects of targeting causing interactions that you don't like. Maybe you like this. Maybe you need the balancing effect, but I think that makes this card way less fun. As far as the abilities, I love it. I love the idea that, you know, there's 3 different ways to measure strength, and I want to win all of those contests. I don't really care if this is the right cost for that. I just think this is a cool card. Unique lines of text really excite me, and that one has a lot of it. So, Unicycle, uncommon, 1 mana, artifact vehicle, 1/1 trample. You know, your traditional 1/1 trampler. That's always a sign something's going on. Unicycle gets +1/+1 for each creature crewing it. Crew 1. So another card that basically answers the question, can I overcrew this creature, or this vehicle? We'll note that it's a vehicle. So not everybody thinks a unicycle is an equipment. This person got it right. Right, according to Mark Rosewater. Does a unicycle? I don't know. I don't know about the trope of like piling a bunch of creatures on a unicycle. I guess that's a thing. I could see how that would lead to trample, because, you know, like this big ball of people, performers, like crashes over you and tramples. That's kind of cool. Yeah, I think the art could sell it. It feels kind of like an uncard, but let's be honest, Bigtopia feels like an unset. If we did Bigtopia in Black Border, and it didn't at least have some Rakdos vibe to it, I'd be super surprised. So, there you go. Yeah, it's a cool card. I like it. Plate spinning at rare 2BB enchantment. When plate spinning enters the battlefield, target opponent gains control of it. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a plate counter on plate spinning, then you may pay 1 for each plate counter on it. Remember, this is the opponent's doing this. I gave this to my opponent, and my opponent has this drawback now. At the beginning of their upkeep, they put a counter on it, and they pay 1 for each counter, and if they don't, they sacrifice plate spinning, and they lose 5 life, and the original controller gains 5 life. So, like, 99% of the time, this is just 2BB sorcery, drain target opponent for 5, which is pretty powerful. That card is probably constructed worthy, possibly just too good if aggro black is in any way a deck. But the concept is cool. I really like where the plate spinning minigame is going. A lot of the judges pointed this out, but I think the best thing that could be done with this card would be to replace this drawback with something where you have a reason to put it off rather than just do it immediately. Like, if you cast plate spinning on me, unless I'm about to win the game, I'm just going to let it die. I'm not going to try to pay for it. I'm not going to be like, I'll pay 1, all right, I'll pay 2, I'll pay 3, now I'll sacrifice it. Like, that's no fun. Why would I waste 6 mana knowing I'm just going to sacrifice it eventually, unless I expected to draw a naturalize or something. What you want is a drawback where I don't want it to happen now, but in 2 turns I'll be okay with it. You know, something like sacrifice plate spinning, you sacrifice half your creatures, and so like I can keep attacking and forcing you to chump block, and you don't want to trade because you know I'm going to lose all these creatures in a minute. Or discard half your hand. So like if I can empty my hand out, which is an interesting tension with the paying of a mana, then I can let it die and then I didn't lose anything. So interesting concept. I really like it. The final drawback needs a lot of work, but as a package I see where they're going and the flavor's pretty cool. Design 6, Trick Riding, a rare GW enchantment. Creatures you control crew vehicles with their toughness rather than their power. This is a really bizarre line of text, and I love Doran. But part of the thing that makes Doran cool is Doran works on its own. You cast Doran, you have a 5/5 creature. It says 0/5, but it's really a 5/5 creature. So why isn't this like a vehicle? Or maybe a creature that tutors up a vehicle? Like this could be a 1/4 that lets you go get a vehicle out of your library, or you know, something that helps ensure that this line of text is always going to be relevant. Because the worst thing about cards like this is you cast them and you don't draw your other pieces, so the card did nothing. Or you build a deck around it, and you draw all your other cards, and you don't draw this card, so it doesn't do anything, and your deck just falls apart. Frankly, I'd also expect just to see this on a card that had the Doran ability, like it's kind of a logical extension of Doran. I want to put this in a deck full of tough creatures rather than power creatures, and at that point, can't we just go full hog? But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised to see this line of text on a card someday, but it's not going to be by itself. So it's a cool card. Just needs more work, like many. It's just how it is when you're designing cards. Clown Car. Another Clown Car. Everyone does Clown Car, apparently. Mythic Rare, 4 mana, Artifact Vehicle, 4/4 haste. Whenever Clown Car deals combat damage to a player, choose up to one target creature that crewed Clown Car this turn. If you can say this tongue twister, then you get to create a tapped token that is a copy of that creature, and the crew cost is 3. So there's a lot of value here. So it's like a 4 mana 4/4 haste. That's pretty decent, even with a crew cost. And then I get to make tokens, so like I'm making tokens every turn, unless you're chumping. But if I'm casting a 4 mana 4/4, you're probably gonna have trouble blocking unless you're also playing a similarly large deck. Yeah, there's a lot going on here that a little bit scary. Let's assume the rates are fair. Let's assume it gets costed appropriately and it's not oppressive. In that situation, I'm still making a token every turn. That's going to be confusing. It's going to be maybe a different token each time, maybe not. I do like making tokens, so I want this card to work. I want to find a version of this card that is exciting. I want to play this card. You know, it's Mimic Vat, one of my personal favorites. I think I made Mimic Vat. I'm not actually entirely sure, but this is kind of like a Mimic Vat. You get to make different things over time. Very complicated. I'm just not sure how I feel about the method of getting there. You have to hit your opponent. And then the thing that you're copying has to be something that crewed, which is fine. You can crew with a 0 power plus a 3 power and copy the 0 power if that's what you want to do. I think the thing I don't like is honestly just the flavor. This doesn't feel like a clown car. Like, clown car is about stuffing a bunch of stuff in, and nothing about this encourages me to stuff a bunch of stuff. It says stuff one big thing and make a copy of that, and then keep going. But if you take away the flavor and call it something else, I think this is really cool. This could be like a clone car. It should be a clone car. I see what you did there. It's a clone car. We're done. We're moving on. Kai, Ringmaster, Mythic Rare, 4WW, Legendary Creature, Human Clown, 2/2. I don't know why Ringmaster is a clown. That doesn't feel quite right to me. It feels more like a... it just feels different. But let's pretend that that doesn't matter, because it doesn't. It's a 2/2. When Kai enters the battlefield, create 2 aura enchantment tokens named Spotlight. They have enchanted creature or vehicle, and enchanted permanent gets +2/+2 and has lifelink. Attach them to Kai. WW: attach target Spotlight you control to target permanent you control. Okay, so I love this card. I love the idea of aura tokens that I get to move around. The flavor of them being spotlights is really cool. I don't think lifelink is necessarily important to this card, and it makes it more confusing. I don't think enchanting vehicles is important. Makes it more confusing. I could also argue that maybe it could just create the tokens on anything, although then it's not quite as exciting because now you don't need this attach ability. I would have to play with this card a lot because there's a lot going on here, but the package is really cool. I understand all the pieces and how they work together to create a holistic thing, but at the same time, there's so much going on that I want to cut something. There's just a little too much going on here, but I don't know what it is. So this is a case where I would want to playtest the card, and I'd be really carefully looking for a way to trim a little bit of fat off this card, make it a little bit simpler, find like just that one thing that really matters. What's the key selling point of this card? What's its soul? And kind of whittle it down to its soul until it's perfect. That's what I'd be trying to do. And that takes a lot of time. I wouldn't have expected a great designer candidate to be able to do that in the amount of time they have, because I could see that taking weeks of playtesting over a lot of different FFL decks or whatever. But yeah, I love it. I love the core concept. I just don't know where the true soul of this card is. So, finally, we have Scott Wilson. As we come up on the second hour of this, closing in on 2 hours. Let's see if we can finish this up. Seltzer Bottle, common, 1R, sorcery, escalate 1B. So you've got a card with an off-color escalate cost. Choose one or both. Up to 2 target creatures can't block this turn. And or Seltzer Bottle deals 2 damage divided as you choose among 1 or 2 target creatures and or players. So those are like completely different effects. Most of the time you are much more interested in the second ability, but the first one helps you race. Falters are interesting. Falters with bonus effects are generally not safe cards, because Falter, and when I say Falter, what I mean is a card that says these creatures can't block. Something that says, you know what, you were planning on racing me by blocking some of my creatures. Just kidding. Those creatures can't block. I swing, you can't block. Whenever a Falter effect is on a card that has an otherwise positive rate or good effect on the game, you get something that often runs away with the game. Something that just becomes super powerful. So you get things like the On-Crop Crasher. Like, this is a Falter effect, but it's also just, it's a 3 mana 3/2 haste, which is almost constructed playable on its own. And then you get this falter effect tacked onto it, which just wins games out of nowhere. So we generally try not to mix a falter effect with an otherwise powerful effect, because we want you to, if you're going to play the falter card, you have to pay the cost of having that card in your deck. You have to accept that sometimes you're going to draw it, and getting through for those last bits of damage to win the game isn't what you need right now, and so your card is taking up an unwanted slot in your hand. And the benefit of that is sometimes you just win the game. That's like falter effects are. They're not really flip a coin, win the game if it comes up to heads, but like conceptually the design space is in that realm. It's very much like when you cast this card, you might just win the game. So that's cool. But by putting this deal damage, you've created a card that is never dead. You never draw this card and go, oh, I don't want to falter, I guess I'm paying the price. You say, oh, well, I'm not paying the price. I'm just going to do 2 damage to your creature and kill it. And that's ignoring some of the other flaws of this card, one of which is it's kind of like up to 3 or 4 creatures can't block because you just kill the ones that are small, and the fact that nothing about this card is black. So there's a lot of problems here. All of that being said, the gem of this card is the off-color escalate. Like, I think that is a thing that I want to see happen someday. In order to make that happen, I feel like you need to come up with a cycle of 5 cards going around the color wheel. Each has escalate for the color next to it. And the card has to basically feel like it's monocolored if you use one of the modes and multicolored or the other color if you use both modes. And that's a hard challenge. That is a really restrictive box of design constraints. And as a challenger, that's like, as a designer, that challenge like speaks to me. It's like, here's this really interesting puzzle. Can you find the cards that fit it? This one doesn't. There probably are cards that fit it. I don't have one off the top of my head. My first one that I came up with would probably be a white-green one, because white and green were the closest together, but yeah, I don't have anything off the top of my head. I could see something like maybe a blue-black card where blue had bounce and something else, and together you got a black card which was removal spell, but blue doesn't get discard. Maybe blue could say, put target creature from the battlefield onto the stack, counter a spell, and the black version is basically now it's removal because you did both. That card doesn't actually work. It's really weird. There's no way we'd ever print that card, but hopefully you can see where I'm going with that. So anyways, design number 2, Trapeze Artist, common, 1 white-blue, creature human, 2/2 flying. Trapeze Artist gets +1/+1 as long as you control a black, red, or green permanent. I like conceptually what's being gone for here. It's saying conceptually that a circus is bigger than the sum of its parts. That like everybody works together to create a show, and that performers in that show come from all walks of life and have all sorts of skills, and that's what makes a circus a circus. Is you got all these cool things left and right, boom, bam, cool. The problem is it's a pretty big ask. It's a pretty big ask to say, here's this card that has 2 colors in it already, but to get maximal value, to get above rate, because 1 WU for a 2/2 flyer is really weak for today's creatures. In order to beat that, you have to have a 3rd color? Like, that's asking a lot. 3 colors is really hard to make work while unlimited. It's something that Wizards avoids doing very often. And when it happens, there's a ton of support for it. And so this is kind of saying really loudly this is going to be a 3-color set, and nothing else so far. Well, we've only seen 1 card. So maybe that's a thing. Maybe that's what they're going for. But that's what this tells me. This tells me this is going to be a wedge or such set. So in that, maybe, I think the easiest fix for this card is actually just to make it hybrid, make it cost either 2W or 2U, and I think this card suddenly becomes a really interesting design. So I like it. I like where it goes. I just think it didn't quite do it perfectly. And I know Hybrid Man is technically deciduous, so you can't use it and escalate in the same test. I don't care. That's not the problem. That's not my problem. Sorry, I hate to be a dick, but you know, if you can't make the proper design, make something else that is proper. Circus Peanuts, an uncommon 2G artifact concession. Subtype is interesting. Circus Peanuts enters the battlefield with 3 snack counters on it. Tap, remove a snack counter from Circus Peanuts. Add 1 mana of any color. When there are no snack counters on Circus Peanuts, sacrifice it and create a 3/3 green elephant creature token. There's a lot of text. There's a lot of stuff going on here. You gotta walk through a lot of stuff to figure out what it does, and then you're like, but at least it tells a story in order. It tells the story of, okay, I get 3 counters, what do I do with those counters? Oh, those counters immediately give me mana. Cool, so A gives me B, and I want B. And then you say, oh, okay, now what? Well, there's no snack counters. Well, I understand how I get rid of the snack counters. I made 3 mana. And then I get a 3/3 when I'm all done with my mana. So I go A to B, B, B to C, but I want all of those pieces. So this is a card where the sequence is something I really want to do in a limited game, and it makes sense. So I actually really love this. I'm not sure if it needs to cost 2G, but that's not my problem. That's a development concern. It doesn't need to have a subtype. Concession isn't doing anything here. I would make a concession and remove it. But otherwise, I think this is an amazing card. And the judges agreed. They all loved this. They said this was possibly the best card of the entire Challenge 1. Yeah. So I'd love to see the cycle of this. Putting a subtype on it implies that there's a cycle, and I'd love to see the cycle, and that's a good sign when you create a card, and if people are like, where's the other 4 cards, that tells you you did something cool. So that's always a good sign. Not much else to say about this. I think it's an awesome card. Lion Tamer, uncommon, 2GW, creature human, 1/1. When Lion Tamer enters the battlefield, create a 2/2 white cat creature token. 1 and tap to give target cat +3/+3 until end of turn. This card is fine. There's really not much excitement going on here. I mean, it's a pretty typical. We make lots of uncommons where you get 2 cards, where you either get 2 tokens or you get a creature that makes a token. Usually, if there's a creature that makes a token, there's a little bit of some sort of interaction, like the Splicers. You know, Splicers, they make a token and they say all your tokens get X. This is kind of that space. This card's totally printable. I think that's pretty much what I just said. I said we make these cards all the time, so obviously this card is printable. Not really that exciting. Pretty nuts and bolts. Pretty derivative, which is fine. I think there's a lot of value in a great designer candidate showing that they can make derivative designs that fit the theme they're going for and fit the theme that's being asked for, as long as that's not all they do. So I appreciate this, you know. Thumbs up for this card. I don't have much to say about it, though. Feats of Strength at rare. 1G, instant, escalate 1R, so we're got another one of those off-color escalates to see if it works out. Choose 1 or more. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on target creature. Target creature gains indestructible and trample until end of turn. Target creature you control fights target creature you don't control. So, you know, playing into the whole feats of strength, does it mean getting stronger or does it mean using your strength? This has kind of 2 getting strongers and 1 using your strength. So it's kind of the whole package. Doesn't bother me, but it bothers some judges. All of those abilities feel green individually. Do they feel red combined? Kind of. I think the fighting is the closest, like turning it from a simple pump or simple fight into a pump plus fight makes it much more like a red spell because you're much more likely you're killing a thing at no cost. So, sure. I think maybe if you lost the middle ability, or maybe if it was just... Actually, you know what? Take that out. Second ability plus third ability definitely feels red, so that's kind of cool. I think I like that part best. Wouldn't be rare if it was just those 2. And the more I think about it, the more I think this card just doesn't make sense at rare. Like, this is a limited card. It does things you want to do in limited. Pump your creatures, give them indestructible and trample, fight. the whole package, no matter how many ways you slice and dice it, there's no way I'm playing this in constructed, so it shouldn't be a rare. But that's okay. We can save this card. Just make it the first. Make it either this ability and this ability, or this. Make it either the first ability in the third, or the second ability in the third. Done. Now it's an uncommon. Great. Makes limited awesome. You've solved the green into red escalate, and I love it. It's just, I guess, mildly unfortunate that the designer didn't think of that the first time, but again, iterative design. That's what we do as designers. We come up with the seed of an idea, and then we iterate on it. So, design 6. Cyrus's Circus Tent. It's a legendary land that taps for colorless, or 1 mana of any color that other lands you control couldn't produce. So, I love that line of text. Add 1 mana of color that other lands you control couldn't produce. But I love it as a Melvin. I love it as a designer. I love it as someone who's like, there's a line of text that we've never printed. It kind of raises my eyebrow. Does it work? That's cool. It's neat. It's unique. It's original. Let's play it. And then you find out when you read the judge comments that there's a reason that they haven't printed this line of text, because they don't actually think it works in the rules. And unfortunately, this is sometimes text that doesn't work in the rules is really awesome and is worth trying to save, and you try to find a way around it, and you keep trying and you keep trying until you finally print double-faced cards, you finally print miracles, or you finally print whatever it is, that cool idea, that cool nugget that you've been working on for years, that mind slave or whatever it is. In this case, it's not even that great of a line of text once you actually get to play it. It's just a good city of brass. Like, that's the upside. So, I don't know. I think we got to be careful as a designer. You don't want to be the designer that falls in love with being clever, because being clever is not what sells Magic cards. Being clever is not what makes the game fun. Being clever is what makes one designer look at another designer's work and go, that was cool, that was a great idea, let's not do that. So, yeah, love the line of text. I can see why it doesn't work. Design 7, Cirrus McBride Ringmaster. Mythic rare, costs Wooburg, 1 of each color. Legendary creature giant. I love it. Ringmaster is a giant. That makes so much sense. That is amazing. I missed that the first time through. When Cirrus McBride Ringmaster enters the battlefield, exile the top X cards of your library face down, where X is the number of colors among other permanents you control. So up to 5 cards, basically. At the beginning of your upkeep, reveal one of the exiled cards at random. If it's a land card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. And it's a 5/5. So, when you're firing on all cylinders, you paid 5 mana for a 5/5 and up to 5 free cards, which is, you know, a reasonably decent reward for a reasonably decent setup. You know, probably, let's say the average of this, so I'm playing a Wooburg deck, so I'm going to have probably maybe 3 colors of permanence when I cast this on average. 3 cards over the next 3 turns, that's cool. I think the biggest problem I have with this card is it's kind of just card advantage. It doesn't speak to me. It doesn't do anything new and unique. It just kind of mixes and matches. It's like, you know, a variation of Converge plus card advantage. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything here that makes me say, wow, that's cool and unique. I don't know how that's going to play. And it's, you know, it's telling me to build a deck, but I'm not even sure if it's a deck that I really care that much about building. Are there enough other cards that care about having 5 colors of permanence? There's a few, but do enough of those exist that that's the thing I want to do? So hopefully this is a theme in the set, and this is one of the more derivative rares for that set, which is fine. If we printed a set where that set was based around having all colors of permanence in play as your goal, like your uncommons and rares and mythics, there was some number of each of those that said have 5 colors of permanence to maximize your reward, or at least have multiple colors, which I see they did on the flyer, for example. I would expect at least one of the rares to be something like this, where it's just pure card advantage. For a design test, I would have liked to have seen it taken to the next level and come up with a truly mind-blowing ability. But You know, I'm not going to hold that against you too much because you've already done something cool here. I just don't know if it's a ringmaster. That's my other concern. And maybe. I mean, I get the concept. The more colors you have, the more acts that are going on, the more awesome it is, the more your payoff. The ringmaster kind of hypes it up. It's there. It's a little bit tenuous. It's not a home run. You know, it's like a B- on both the mechanical and the flavor perspective. So that's cool. Design 8, Mitzi Wild, a magician, mythic rare. 4 UB, legendary planeswalker, 5 loyalty. +1, target opponent exiles the top card of their library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. -3, exile target creature. Create a 2/2 blue illusion creature token with, when this creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, sacrifice it. -7, target opponent gets an emblem with, when you become the target of a spell or ability, you lose the game. So another magician planeswalker, kind of playing up the same line. You know, +1, make the top card of opponent's library vanish. -3, make a creature vanish. -7, make an opponent vanish. That's cool. I love the story. A really cool story. -3 is really good. It's even better than that other one. Like, well, maybe. I don't know. It's arguable. What's better, a 1/1 flyer or a 2/2 illusion? They're kind of similar in power level. I don't think I have much to say about this that I didn't say about the other one. Like, you're going to do the -3 almost all the time. If you're doing the +1, it's just so you can get to the -7 because the +1 is... Well, in this case, it's card advantage, so it's not as bad. I like this +1 a bit better. Not quite as consistent and thorough a story, but it's better from a mechanical standpoint. So my suggestion would be take this card, take the other card, find where the interconnection is, and try and like create one whole card. And that's, while not something you would do in a great designer search, it's totally what R&D does. They'll take a bunch of different ideas that people have brainstormed. Sometimes like they'll have a hole filling session where they'll say, hey, everybody design me a magician planeswalker, and they'll like write all the things on the board. They'll be like, well, this plus this plus this plus this is the best idea. Like a lot of times a whole fill will not be any one person's card. It'll be 2 or 3 cards kind of mushed together to become greater than the sum of their parts. And I think that's what I would do with this card and the other planeswalkers. I'd try to find the synergy of the abilities that creates the most interesting planeswalker. Yeah, that's what I got. I think that's it. I think this was a much better round overall. I applaud the designers. A lot of designers improved. I think the overall quality of cards improved a ton. There wasn't any like, oh my god, every design you made makes my head hurt. Nothing like that. It was great. Super excited to see the next round. And that's my take. So if you liked this, let me know. Give me some suggestions. Give me some feedback. I can't believe I just talked for 2 hours on 56 cards, but there you go. I guess that's just how the GDS works. And I'm not going to have time to edit this because the next round comes out on Thursday. So there's no freaking way I can put that much time into it. I apologize if anybody was offended. That was not my intention. I'm trying to be honest and tell you how I feel about your cards, and I totally respect everybody who got to this point. You're all amazing designers already just for getting here, and this is a really hard job and a really hard thing to do. Speaking as someone who's done it. So you're all awesome. I love you all. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you next time. Cheers.